right, we are now at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and kick things off. Welcome, everyone. We're ready to get started with our webinar. My name is Melissa Smith. I'm the Managing Editor of Content Solutions here at HousingWire, and our topic today is real estate tech that's redefining homeownership, sponsored by Tavant. Just a few housekeeping items. We'll be having a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar, and you can submit your questions at any time by clicking on the Q&A button on the screen. Also, HousingWire will be sending a webinar recording to all registrants within the next 24 hours. Now moving on over to our panelists. Today we're joined by Brad, Head of Prop Tech and Marketing at Tavant. He's joining us from Santa Clara, California. Not too far away in San Francisco, we have Debbie, the Senior Director of FinTech Partnerships at Tavant. Hopping all the way over to the East Coast is Matt in Philadelphia. He serves as Senior Director of FinTech at Tavant. And last but not least, hopping back into California, we have Tara, who is a residential and new development real estate agent with Douglas Elliman in California. Now I'll hand things off to Debbie to get us started.
Thank you, Melissa. Hi, everybody. Nice to see everyone. I hope it's really a nice day in California, especially San Francisco. So I can't wait to get started. And thanks, Matt, for pulling up the slideshow. As you can see from the first slide, we are talking about, what real estate is and what's the future. Like 10 years back, how did you envision the real estate would be like, not just in California, but across the country's footprint. So let's go to slide 2. So imagine like finding your new home dream home in California, like good luck to that, as it clearly says on our header. Like California housing market has been very tight the last few years, but these are no regular times, like instead of the traditional house buying open houses where dozens of people flock together at their own leisure and, stay for hours and, but especially in the last year and a half, showings to one group at a time has been very restrictive. Homes are selling at very warpy speed, nationwide, forcing the to-be buyers to make, snap decisions on what is typically the biggest purchase of their lives. So imagine it's almost like a speed dating, like you go on a speed date the first day, and the next day you are expected to marry the person. I mean, like that is horrific, right? So moving to the next slide, we imagine, this is one of my favorite slides, is you have a dream car, which is like, as Brad says, a Maserati, a $150,000 car, to your dream house. So you can actually, cash out or spend $150,000, towards a car in 30 minutes. But can you really do that when you're buying a home in 30 minutes? Of course not. It takes about like 30 to 45, business days for closing. Then you have the bunch of paperwork. And the inevitable reality is that flying cars will confer advantages on direct users. Imagine, having a peace of mind, and the proponents offering a more utopian, I call it the more utopian vision of seamless convenience and efficiency, but does it really deliver towards our broad-based societal benefits? So if we look back 10 years from now, as I was saying, we might be, what have just happened, So just think outside the box and not confine yourself within the box. So the real vision is this online smart home buying was probably may or may not be for the future, but yes, it is possible. Like, let's just jump and see what might happen. Today, our home search begins online. This would grow probably a zero for how long home buying would take, financing, improving, selling. If we look in 20 years from now, what if we could just search everything by the click of a mouse, whether you want to finance, you want to improve, sell your home all in one place. So banks, real estate companies, tech companies, media companies will all collaborate together and would make it a one-stop shop buying experience. So the next slide, if you go on to the next slide, we would be probably envisioning, is California just low in inventory, or it's a statewide or nationwide? So removing maybe like regulatory barriers at the local, state, or federal level will allow more homes and apartments to be built and reduce the overall time and cost of building. So housing shortages occur because supply and demand at any particular location changes. The market always reacts and acts and reacts, I'd say, by trying to reach Californian rising demand. So I remember I was reading this article by Freddie Mac's chief economist, Sam Catter. He actually warned that the new housing supply is not keeping pace with the rising demand. What are your thoughts on this, Tara? I wanted to hear your perspective because I see these graphical representations, and you being a real estate, hands-on real estate experience, what do you see the world or the real estate market would take for the next years down the line?
That's a great point and question that you raise. Through COVID, it's not any secret that any brokerage, even the longest standing brokerages across the country, saw unprecedented moves and shifts of behavior. So for example, you saw at the beginning, especially during COVID, when we were all locked up in our homes, we were very uncertain. We can't really go out and show homes. How do we still service our clients? Because people still wanted to figure out how to keep the economy going, invest in homes, and make the right and most informed decisions. And what we saw was a really refreshing collaboration between even the most directly competitive brokerages across the country. And this direct connectivity and collaboration was something we continue to see throughout at least the beginning of COVID. And then the digital and technology started to also catch on board. The use of video to help engage clients and show properties via FaceTime, the amount of homes that were closed sight unseen hit unprecedented levels. And so these different shifts of behaviors that were brought on through COVID that were supported by digital acceleration and digital advancement, I think, in real estate in general, these were things that were lacking before. And given the generations that are very tech savvy now or born into it, this expectation is only going to be heightened going forward. They're going to expect that all of these connections and technologies become more complex and more sophisticated as their need grows. So it's no secret that the lack of supply and incredible demand is fueling home appreciation across the country. You see median home price sales over 20% year over year in California. You can jump to North Carolina, in Charlotte, and it's over 20% as well. And then you have different parts of Texas that range between 10 to over 17% in median home price increase year over year. And then even someplace that I didn't really expect, but Utah is still, and Utah specifically is expected to continue to see home price median increase through the rest of 2021. So I think all of these behaviors represent this connection to what is happening in the workforce and the remote buyers and how our economy is really shifting dramatically in multiple types of behaviors. So I think the movement that we will continue to see going forward will be directly correlated to the job markets. There were millions of new businesses founded in 2020 and 2020. And I think that will dramatically impact how our economies and people just behave. The values that are placed on this whole American dream of what the concept of home is, the value placed on home and how homes are actually utilized. So before I did escrow before I was in a real estate agent, and I would see a lot of international people coming in and buying homes with their friends. And I've been pumping this to all of my friends, like normalize investing on homes with your friends, okay? Because
that'll be so cool.
Yeah. In hot markets like this, and you see apps like Picasso coming out, and people moving their primary residences to tax-free or more tax beneficial states, you see people start to make more financially more informed and smart decisions. And I think we are going to continue to see that. And then as a result, as the service providers, real estate agents, lenders, appraisers, everything, we will need to adjust to accommodate these new shifts of behavior. So I think going forward, the demand is going to be different, but it'll still.
Interesting. Let's hear from Matt and Brad. Matt, what about guy? I need to hear from the boys.
So, when I look at this data, not only do we see the absolutely just hard to even put into words, massive growth across the housing industry in terms of home purchases this year. But we also see kind of, and we'll get into the details of this a little bit further in our conversation here together, but we're also seeing some kind of the pain points start to emerge to the top of the consumer interaction and also the lender and the realtor interactions. And so hold on to that thought. We're going to come back to it. I would like to hear, Brad, a little bit more from your perspective, Brad, from the PropTech perspective of how you see the data shifting us towards a different definition of home?
For sure. So as we talk a lot about macroeconomic data, and that's what we're looking at here. When you actually talk about microeconomic data or unit-specific data, 3 weeks ago, Zillow released something. A home that had a treehouse on it was sold for a premium of 2.2% higher than one that did not in the same exact comps. Put that in perspective. The average house, $350,000 being listed across the US. Having a treehouse, which most people view as a nuisance in the backyard, generates an extra $7,700 in revenue. Now, what does that tell you? It doesn't necessarily tell you people like tree houses, because the same goes for garages. What it tells you is people want the home to be more than it was. They don't want the home to be a house. Maybe in the past, myself included, I've lived in houses, but home is a different thing. Now, Tara, I saw something in Los Angeles, something crazy, something about like 2 kitchens and people really wanting 2 kitchens. Was that an actual factual statement there?
That is actually a thing. Yes. So I was actually just going to bring that up. I'm so glad we read the same article. So yeah, but apparently, there's different data coming out, because I think it's something that we've seen during COVID. There's a lot of unique motivation coming out and starting to be tracked that wasn't previously as strong as a steer or a deterrent. So the 2 kitchens, I think, is a very unique space, because one thing that I've learned about all my traveling and living abroad or across the country is that people will always gather around food and music. So, but during COVID, that might not always be a great thing. So having 2 kitchens, I think, does a lot for, the mental health and the whole value of the home in general, and how you're able to divvy it up and separate yourselves.
That's a lot of cooking. I mean, for 2 kids.
Also a lot of cooking.
Oh God.
A lot of dishes.
Yeah, a lot of dishes.
So
dishwashers too.
So to kind of frame the conversation going forward, we're gonna deal with those pain points here in just a little bit, but I wanted to give us a framework that we can kind of keep our thoughts within. Home buying and the home buying journey is changing, and in fact, you can probably say it in the past tense. It has changed, and when you look at the spectrum from shopping to ownership, shopping, buying to ownership, what we're seeing is kind of every stop along the way that you can see at the bottom of this slide has some sort of kind of digital innovation, some sort of new way of combining old forces to deliver both speed and convenience, and speed and clarity, and speed and accuracy. The underpinning, I think, need is speed when a market is such as it is today. So the arc of home buying is really how I want us to think about going forward. How do we realize a vision of the future where an instant home ownership can actually happen before we get flying cars? How do we make that occur? It's going to be within an approach like this, where we look at our processes and our operations, and we begin breaking them down according to the capability we have and the capability that's attainable for the company that we run. Okay, so moving forward, let's jump into a little bit of numbers, and then we'll jump into kind of a story. This is just a quick kind of mental check of what happened last year. My question to you to ask for yourself is, how has this changed your company? How has this changed the market? How are things truly indelibly different today than they were 12 and 24 and 36 months ago? We see a lot of differences. So I'm with Tavant on the East Coast on the fintech practice. And when I interact with my clients, I'm seeing changes in operations that they would have never considered before. I'm seeing shrewd decisions on what digital capability to pursue and what not to pursue. I'm also seeing large commitments of reworking the foundation so that the companies can scale out to a volume into a margin that never was attainable before. All of those are in motion right now, and they're in motion not in a trivial sense, in a sense that we have projects completing every day of the week that's driving this forward, and all within the context of how do we respond better for when we have a large expansion like this today. So let's talk about our future vision and how it kind of meets reality today. Brad? Sorry, Brad.
All right. Yeah, sorry about that. Let's talk a little bit about the vision. Most people in America now have a vision that surrounds them having space, a yard, a garage, an office to work out of. And if they can't, they're going to buy, a $7,000 or $8,000 tough shed thing, have it outfitted and put it in the backyard. But the concept of family is coming back more to the individual home versus a house again, and it's moving out of the urban areas and more into suburbia. So as you look at the value of a home, every one of us can take this differently, but we've actually all experienced our own degree of this over the past year and a half.
Mhm.
So let's look at this a little bit more as we jump in. Today, when you search for a home in a hot market, and this is data from a hot market right here, this is Southern California. In a hot market, I see all these red dots on the left from realtor.com, and I see, okay, there's a lot of homes for sale. I double click into these, and 80% of them are already listed as pending. So they're already listed as pending. So the misnomer that I have this many options of homes to buy, and I can actually fulfill different kind of needs that I have in terms of number of bedrooms, price points, bathrooms, garages, pool, no pool, yard, no yard, all that. It is a misnomer, because when you look into it, look at this, pending, 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 pending.
Right.
Great, there's one that's not pending. Guess what? I'm actually wondering why that one's not pending. So now in my head, I'm saying, okay, that $1.34 million one in Southern California, why is it not pending today? 80% of searches in hot markets, not just California, hot markets are in other places. Naples, Florida, hot market right now. Other places, Austin, Texas, always been a hot market. Of course, where I live in Northern California, hot market, and the Pacific Northwest. But even in New England, I mean, Matt, where you live, I'm pretty sure your home price skyrocketed recently, and I believe you said almost unexpectedly.
I mean, it's unreasonable math. I mean, it's layered on about $120,000 of value in the past 18 months. And I think realtors here just feel obligated to put the sign in the front yard, even though the house was, listed and sold within hours. It's just more for saying this happened than this is happening. And, it's such a tough market now to be a buyer because your options come and go so quickly.
For sure. So this points it out as how quickly they go. So let's go a little bit further and say, finally, you found what you'd call your dream home. You spent hours on Zillow, Realtor, Opendoor, Redfin, whatever platform you use today, and you found your dream home. Here, I found a dream home. I looked at this home, 1.3 million. It's slightly more than I can afford, but it matches everything that my family would need. It's in Carlsbad, great schools. It's near Legoland. It's in Southern California. The irony is there is no industry down there. There are no jobs down there for someone like myself. There is no tech in this area. This is a area of land between Orange County and San Diego. A lot of nice homes, but there's actually no jobs or tech there. But I still look around and I say, you know what, this $1.3 million home, this is the one for me. Then I double click into it a little bit more. And I say, okay, as I double click into this specific house at 1.3 million, I need to look at what was happening historically and what was happening before with this house. So as we jump into that, and Matt, just click forward one, please. As we jump into that, you see 10 months ago, this exact property was listed for $980,000 and sold. And in 10 months, it went up 33% in price. And I hate to tell everyone on here, this individual property did sell for higher than 1.3 million. It sold above asking, which is normal. No work was done on this house. No renovations were done. Maybe the photos were taken on a sunnier day. That's about it. I'm sure it was staged. That cost about, $8,000, but nothing changed. The demand for this area changed. An area where there literally is no, I don't want to say no, there's not that much industry or jobs, but everyone who has the opportunity to move out of Orange County, Los Angeles, San Francisco, other places, they're migrating out to homes that have views and decks and outdoor space, and they're willing to pay the premium. But in this case, the premium is literally over $300,000 and pushing on $400,000 in a matter of 10 months. And so 33% gain in sale price. I'm not saying equity because I don't think the equity or the appraised value would go up that much, but the demand generates this price point. So it's very fascinating as you look at this. And I think we've all been in this. I mean, everyone saw the Saturday Night Live skit where couples are sitting at home in bed, Zillowing, looking for their dream home. And this is kind of the concept here. And as we look into it a little bit more, reality sets in and people are like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And by the way, this reality just set in for me personally. So I'm fully in this boat. Many people, that unfortunately is not me there though. But the reality sets in and it's like, okay, how can we, the industry, make a difference here? The difference is data, and it's for better or worse, but it's for transparency. So let's look at two things right here. On the left, we see a neighborhood. This neighborhood currently has one home for sale in it. Let's say that you and your partner decided this is the neighborhood you want to live in. You want to get a dog, have some kids, raise your family in this neighborhood, and you love this street. You love this street so much. There's only one home on the market on this street. So you're pretty much handcuffed. No optionality. We in the lending and real estate industry have looked at data forever, whether it's real estate comps via the MLS, whether it's the trends of mortgage rates going up and down, whether it's the loan to value ratios that we use. We've looked at data all day long, but we selfishly look at that data for ourselves. For the home buyer, knowing the propensity that a home is going to be listed for sale in the next 3 months is golden. So a propensity to list model, it is not by any means dramatically out there in terms of how you'd get it. It's an AI-driven algorithmic model that bases on many factors, of which some of the most important truly are the empty nester syndrome. When people hit certain age, their kids graduated from high school and they move on to something else, college, and the couple becomes an empty nester. These are large factors that come into play here. But these factors all come into play to create a propensity to list model. And not many companies have dove into this before. There are a couple, Tavant is one of them. The value of the propensity to list model is fourfold. So the first, as a home buyer, I am walking through and I'm saying, okay, I need to know the likelihood that another home is going to sell in this market. Secondarily, let's just say Matt is the lender. As a lender, Matt's going to look and say, oh my God, I've got 4 Casson Street right here in one of my portfolios, and I see that there's a 71% chance it's going to be listed for sale. That means I'm losing my loan and my servicing rights right there. Now, we talk about Tara. Tara is a real estate agent. This is gold for a real estate agent, right, Tara?
Gold. So no, but seriously, like going back to what we were talking about, closing the gap of what like current supply and current demand is. New builds, everyone talks about how lumber is so expensive, blah, blah, blah. But if all the new builds of all the empty properties across America were built, that would still only constitute 10% of the gap that we need to fill. So what that means is that we need existing home sales to come on the market. And as we're bouncing back from, a really crazy year, there's so much hesitation and data and how data is captured and how us real estate agents really project or kind of try to create this crystal ball to best educate and advise our clients is we look at obviously pending sales in an area, last 2 months, last 3 months, maybe the last 6 months of sales to, establish some kind of pattern to predict going forward. But if we had something that was better to predict and we could ease the fears of the sellers and make them more confident and also make them more informed about what their options were in terms of where they could go, that to me would change the game, quite literally. And it's things like this, and this is the way that the AI technology is really advancing real estate. Like this is what we really need to be open-minded about in terms of how it can really help us better serve our customers and our clients.
Yeah, for sure. And think about the fourth use case right here. So let's say Debbie's about to sell 41 Casson Street and she's going to list it on August 1st because that's ideal for her. And look, there's only one other home on the street that's on the market right now. But if she had the data to know that 4 of her neighbors were going to list theirs on July 15th, 2 weeks before she listed hers, she would probably change the date she would list her home, either early or later.
Immediately, like go and get it.
So the data drives all aspects. It drives it for the home buyer, the home seller, the real estate agent, the lender. Yeah. It drives it for the whole community. But up until this date, we in the industry choose to kind of keep this data as our secret sauce. We don't share it out, but the data exists. And if we don't start sharing it out and empowering our home buyers with this information, they're going to find someone else who gives them the data, and they're going to go there. And that's going to become the next place to search for, find, and buy homes.
Absolutely.
So
That's right.
with
That's
all
right.
that circling back in, the value of this data, the data we have, the data that shows trends that are not macroeconomic trends, but microeconomic trends, the value of 41 Casson Street being listed on the market in the next 90 days. That microeconomic, very geo-specific data is key, maybe to a small set of people, but to that small subset of people, that data is literally gold for them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brad. Just my closing thoughts on this as we move forward in the content is, risk and uncertainty, risk for our businesses, uncertainty for our consumers. It always hangs like a fog in situations where you just don't know what's going to happen. And in a rapidly expanded market like it is today, if you look at the graphs, we all scratch our head and say, okay, when is this thing going to turn? Because that is in our near-term future. So there is risk and uncertainty, but kind of data is that wind that blows it away. It just gently pushes it aside so we can see what's going on. And like Brad said, offering the data and how we offer it, creating a new relationship, a new service, a different kind of interaction, another point of clarity. These all become competitive points for each of us as we decide what's right for our company. So let's talk a little bit about today, right now. So many things have happened over the past 12 and 24 months that a new reality has set in. This is kind of an interesting graph to me. If we look at it through the lens of how is it that the independent mortgage banks have been able to grow so quickly? How is it that they outpaced the other institutions? I think part of it is by nature, they're nimble. I haven't met a loan officer yet that isn't someone who knows how to hustle big time. There's some of that, just kind of good old work ethic is part of it. But I also know that the independent mortgage banks have been much more flexible in how they adopt and consume new capability, how they look at, like, say, just a simple pain point, like disclosure automation. How do we as a company, address disclosure automation, leverage technology that's available, but at the same time, recast operation. I've seen that happen again and again and again across the clients that I interact with. And the pace of innovation has really, really sped up across the board. So I think some of us have heard this. I think some of us may believe it, but I think all of us should take it to heart. Digital has already happened. We like to talk about digital this, digital that. I have already. Every time I said digital, there should be a bell that rings. I think I'm at like 24. And also anything. We thought we would make it digital by putting an E in front of it, right? E this, E that. Again, but here's the reality. It's already happened. These solutions are being perfected. There's some distance to go there, but they're out there. They're in market. So from a perspective of whether on the realty end of things or the lending end of things, there are solutions and capabilities in market right now. And it's just really more of a question of, do you want to be left behind? We've reached that inflection point. It's happened. We've heard it that it's happened. We've heard it in conferences for a couple of years now. But what I'm seeing is, because of the catalyst of the past 12 months, we're all now truly moving in a way that we're reinventing our companies and how we work. And we can have a host of examples across the board here. Whether we're talking about how homes are listed, or how we find them, or how we purchase them, how we sell them, or how we service them, there's all of them have strong examples of startups in industry across the entire prop tech, real estate tech, depending on what you want to name it that way, lending tech space. There are hundreds and hundreds of examples. And this is where our investment's flowing. If you look at it from a VC point of view, this is the target-rich space that they're putting their money into. They know the outcomes are coming, and they know the value of the U.S. Real estate and housing market is tremendous. And in that sense, it's an easy decision of, should we invest in doing business better should we invest in creating new kinds of offerings? It makes total sense, from a today decision. And I hope that just one thing, if you walk away from this small conversation today, is to walk away knowing that the decisions have happened, digital has taken place, there are capabilities on the ground. Don't wait. There is always a way to incorporate the new side by side with how you get work done. And we can do it in a way that doesn't drag your business. I think that's the real trick, and that's the hard part of leadership, is making sure we find a way to make it succeed in the day that we have. Okay, we're going to move forward a little bit. So let's talk about tomorrow's strategies. We talked about decisions you have to make today. We know that kind of the low-level innovations have taken place. They're there for us to grab. But what kind of strategy can we strike going forward? What are some possibilities? So, Debbie found this kind of model, which was interesting just because it's so different from things that we've seen before. And we could pull out of that, get kind of many different models to talk about. But this one's kind of interesting because it involves a kind of a demographic shift, which is a large force in the market, with a work habit shift, with also a way of life. So Debbie, can you explain what this is?
Sure, Matt. Thanks for bringing on the slide. Yeah, this is kind of an interesting picture, guys. If you, I'm going to challenge my audience. Like the first, thought, what just come to your mind? So we all know home ownership, has always been a very important, path to creating equity and wealth for individuals in the long run. It's a very clear observation backed by numerous academic studies. Imagine owning houses or homes amongst friends and not just your family or your immediate family, like parents or grandparents. It's more a communal style of living rather than families and carrying the burden. I'm using the word carrying the burden because it is a burden. It's a multi-generational loan. Matt, remember we were talking about two countries in Europe and France, and even in Japan, the house prices are so exorbitantly high that they have to carry the burden for like 30, 40, even 50 years. So I was wondering, like with the onset of technologies and especially an interesting shift in the mindset of many US consumers has occurred over the last decade, be it peer-to-peer platforms like an Airbnb or even a get around for renting vehicles that has grown enormously in the past few decades. One shared house in 2030, it was an article, which is more a playful research project. So hear me out. It's a project where you aim to get and understand the insights of different and mindsets of different people, random friends or people. And then the viewer goes through a process where they pretend to sign up for a co-living shared space. And then they match based on your preferences. And they bring the 2 or 3 people together and say, okay, you guys have been matched to buy a house together and start building equity. If I can say, it's more like Tinder of home buying. It's like you swipe right if you like the place and your co-shared residence. If you don't like, then swipe left. I know my boyfriend might just get super paranoid at this point. If he hears this webinar, he'll be like, why are you talking about Tinder? So imagine so it's like an IKEA, how IKEA was, right? It's a curious company. They wanted to cater to the entire mass, making sure we can accommodate and, and have a well-designed home space, including many people who couldn't afford designer furniture. So even that company, Matt, that you were mentioning, Katara, right? So you can make a whole bathroom, create that, and then move it out and ship it to your in a giant box to your individual independent home. So I guess it's very unique, and it's all about the change in mindset, because at a low price, all this is needed is for a shared living concept. So I think I would again challenge everybody, including our panelists and the audience, think outside the box rather than just staying within the box and letting what people are doing and absorbing others' attitude and mindset. We need to think outside.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. Okay, so what are we looking at here? We're talking about all along in our presentation, we was like, how do you explain the change? And this is another set of data that helps us understand what's happening across the country, kind of in our time, in our moment right now. So this is interesting data that our friends of CoreLogic shared with us. And what you're seeing is, Brad actually mentioned it earlier, is you're seeing some out-migration to the suburbs. So if you look on the left-hand side and like look at Los Angeles and San Diego, Riverside, Inland Empire is growing, amazingly fast. When I lived in Orange County, I didn't like Riverside. I'm pretty sure if I live in Orange County today, I probably do like Riverside because it's the place you can go when you're trying to seek the home that you want and fulfill that value and live that value that you have with your family. It's also interesting. Do you see these kind of medium-sized dots, speckled across the country? Idaho, Denver, outside of Denver on the Front Range, even little pockets in rural Utah, rural Oregon, down here on the right-hand side, all throughout Tennessee. What are these little dots? They're people that are willing to leave the urban centers, and they're finding a different way of life, a different way of living, and they're also finding this home that makes sense, a home where we want space. We want a place for our children. We want a place for our work. We want a place for our living. And this is fundamental to many of us as Americans of what we're looking for in the marketplace. When you see this large force of migration, what does this mean for your strategy tomorrow? Well, it's not just a question of coverage, like, oh, we need to be licensed in more states. Yeah, that's one of them. But I also think that it's a question of how do you connect? How would you connect with someone in Los Angeles that's going to be moving to outside of Vegas? So that is part of your work and part of your success and part of your business. Kind of seems to me that we're still quite bound in place and time as we operate, but there's huge opportunity if we can free ourselves from that and help ourselves collaborate across boundaries, across state lines, across counties, and even across the country. So that's a few things that I'm seeing in this data on migration. Does anyone else from the group want to chime in and add their thoughts?
Yeah, so I agree with everything that you're saying. Just anecdotally, some things that we've seen across the country, calling and checking with all my colleagues, even across brokerages, literally in every different state to see, like we're saying, the data matters. So we're trying to see as fast as possible, okay, what kind of movement are you seeing to your state at this time? Is it for a month, people, just trying to test out different areas to see where they want to live? Is it semi-permanent, people relocating to more tax-friendly states for income purposes to give them a year or maybe 2 years of a kickstart before they go back to the metropolis that they're from to give them a better chance to actually purchase in that market, right? So they take a year or two outside to try to save up to make themselves stronger candidates in the market that they came from. Or we're seeing some people completely migrate on a more permanent basis and have their primary residence in more tax-friendly states or states that have more space. The motivations, again, there's a wider range right now. And then also having secondary homes in more populated or more active metropolises. So you're seeing people make different types of movement that we weren't seeing before that's directly correlated to the work environment again. And as things shift back to normal, like New York, for example, is already kind of coming back. I can quote Dottie Herman in saying, never bet against New York, right? But the same can be said for many metropolises like Silicon Valley. So people that moved out will come back because the tech hubs are still the tech hubs. And the money is still the international hubs of investors. Like that's still primarily where the money is going to go. So when we're coming back, it's going to be interesting to see this in and out movement, how it continues to shift. And that's where AI technologies really, really have a strong footing in terms of being a key tool in any real estate professional's pocket going forward.
And it always sounds so exotic, artificial intelligence, machine learning. And I think we've kind of fetishized it a little bit. And we've made it mysterious so that we, kind of are impressed by it. But it's actually pretty plain. This is math in action, and it helps us understand the variables.
It's more of a live in the moment kind of data capture.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I think, Matt, just one more thing I want to add. We've used it so many times, the word AI, ML. We just have to really, come back with what other areas we can use with artificial intelligence and not just treat that as a separate, independent, technology tool. So that's something which I would like to think, including me myself, like how can we use that just as a separate entity on its own, but just have a amalgamation of technologies with the machine learning.
Yeah, for sure. All right. This slide is kind of like the third large point we're making in our conversation today. You know, I've shown you kind of the home buying journey, and I'll show it to you again in closing. But this concept is quite simple in the sense that the ecosystem is opening up. You know, where before there were strong boundaries and strong walls and strong barriers between different pieces of the ecosystem. And this is a home purchasing ecosystem, looking all the way from renting to buying and selling. And so as an option for your future, because we're talking about kind of tomorrow's strategies, this is your a la carte menu of a way to conceive, you know, some of the options that your company might have, is to look at it through this lens. Position yourself and your company in the ecosystem and ask yourselves, where are the connections that you could make that would change the nature of your company, make it more durable, more resilient to volatility, more scalable, either direction, up or down, because times are good and times are bad. So it's a very organizing question to ask yourself in terms of the strategy you want to create for yourself, is where do you fit within this ecosystem? You know, can you connect the dots between the way people buy insurance and the way people buy a home? That's pretty typical, you know, in vertically integrated companies. We're seeing those today for sure. You know, they're offering their homeowners insurance, or you can go out and get your own from another place. Okay, got it. That's great. But why is it that people don't? I think, you know, it's always like the two guys that are doing that little side gig for, you know, I won't make fun of the company I use, but, you know, on the side, and they don't make a lot of progress and they don't win a lot of business. So why is that? What is it about my behavior that I felt so much more comfortable going with the firm that I was familiar with? And there's something about the uncertainty that kept me away from it. Those are real operational questions. And those are questions that result in real strategy for your company. And that's just a very simple example with kind of a marginal benefit. Yeah, Brad?
Sorry. One of the things I like about this slide is this visual. Let's simplify it as best we can. It actually only talks about two parties, if you think about it. One party is a house, a property, an apartment, a house, a dwelling, however you want to talk about it. Right. And the other is the person who'll be living in that dwelling, whether they're renting, buying, selling. These are the two main, if this is a movie, they're the main actors. And then the supporting cast is the mortgage company, it's the title company, it's the real estate agent. Those are all supporting casts that are not there for the duration of the relationship. They're almost a transactional thing. No one wants to say lender's transactional, but let's just use that as the analogy here. Those are transactional aspects of helping this individual person get inside this dwelling, whether it's a home, apartment, a rental, whatever it is. And there's so many different ways of doing this. Some of the alternative finance companies that have popped up, you know, the Divvies of the world, the Points, all these other companies that are iFunders, iBuyers, Homeward, one of my personal favorites, they all allow for people to get into a home via a different non-direct path. Whether you can sell your home today to Zillow, and you know what, selling a home for 99.7% of its appraised value, that's awesome. If I could sell a home today for that, boom, great deal, walk away. Cash in pocket, move forward. Option one. Other ones you have is kind of these iFunder models where, you know what, guess what, Brad, me, I'm a renter. I want to buy a home. I don't have the $500,000 cash in pocket. I can take a $500,000 cash loan with, of course, a 3 or 6 month duration on that loan, so that it looks like I'm buying an all cash offer when I buy Debbie's house from her.
No.
Another alternative there. And then the ones no one really talks about is everything that surrounds it's not part of the attach rate, it's actually part of the exterior auxiliaries, and that's the insurance, the homeowner's insurance, the move in, the move out. That's just a cost. It's a cost that annoys most people. But when you really simplify every aspect of the home buying ecosystem, it does come down to just two things. The home, whether it's a home you're going to rent or buy, the dwelling, whatever you want to call it, and the person who's looking to get into that home. Those are the two main actors in the movie. Everyone else is simply supporting cast. And when you simplify it from that perspective, you really realize who the true user is and what you're acting on.
Mhm.
So sometimes we in the industry, myself included, don't take that step back far enough to realize who we're solving the need for. And guess what? The home, the dwelling, the apartment, that's not really a user, that's an inanimate object. So you're really solving for the person who's moving into that property. But great visual here, Matt.
Yeah, thanks. And I think that is a perfect note for us to start kind of driving our wrap up on is, what does this mean for our customers? What does this mean for the people that we serve? Quite literally, it is a service. How do we shape our forward strategies, around the pain points of the customer? I think if you look at this home buying journey and just kind of pause a little bit and look at the bullets underneath each of these categories, these are all opportunities and all decision points for a company. If you came to this conversation today asking yourself, what has changed and how is it changing and how might I react to that change or even drive that change? It's in some small decisions at the bottom of the screen. It's also in acknowledging and understanding the large forces that we've described today, just simply in terms of how do you explain what's been happening in the past 12 and 24 months? We see that the way we work is a very strong force. We see that, high demand, low supply creates very specific problems for customers and for realtors alike, and very specific problems that can be addressed through capabilities that we have. We also see that, migration is changing the footprint of a company and what it means to be a given company in a given location when your customers, people you do business with, are now moving elsewhere. How do we be relevant in that context? And then lastly, just the boundaries of collaboration have really either fallen or have greatly been kind of brought down, and some holes have been punched in walls. And I mean that, like Tara touched on really earlier in our conversation, that, brokerages that are fierce competitors found themselves as fierce collaborators because it was the primacy of the customer and the primacy of a successful contract.
Exactly.
That was drove them. And when we really focus on the customer like that, I think that's where those kind of innovations come true. So just in closing, Tara and Brad and Debbie, kind of please add your closing thoughts while we wrap up.
Yeah, one of the ones I'll go with, and Tara, I'll let you react to this one, but we're looking at this home buying journey right now, and we talk about the home buyer, the home, the real estate agent, and the lender. Let's kind of corollary that, and everyone can think about this in their own way, to a different kind of parallel, and that's buying a car. The joke a long time ago was about car dealers and car salespeople. And we used to talk about, I had a good experience buying a car from Susie or bad one. We don't actually talk about that anymore. Car buying has completely shifted into different paradigms. I actually bought my last 2 cars without ever meeting the car dealer. And so you just think about this, and I'm not trying to have you talk your way out of a job, Tara, but how does this correlate to real estate in the future?
Right.
That's a great point, Brad. And I think I know and I have observed during COVID specifically, with the emergence of all of these technologies through the digital acceleration, is that there is kind of this apprehension on the realtor, real estate agent side of, well, is it really for us, or is it trying to eliminate us? Because you have a lot of tech big companies that I'm not going to name, that their sole goal is to really eliminate certain types of roles. And, a few years ago, similar anecdotes were said about loan officers and loan originators, that they maybe weren't necessary for the process. And what I see from taking a deep dive into all of the artificial intelligence that's coming into the prop tech space in the last at least 8 months is that we need to optimize what we can optimize so we can allow more time to better do our jobs, which is really selling. It's doing the emotional end of the journey, because no artificial intelligence or technology can really replicate that. And residential real estate specifically, and this is heightened during, through, and post-COVID, is an extremely emotional journey. So how do we best utilize technologies like virtual tours, like FaceTiming. There's all these different forms of video that have come out and that have really allowed us to do our jobs in a different way. And now, fast forward a year later, that's the minimum expectation in terms of operations on our end. And so you see this also translated into the loan origination and process. You were seeing it hopefully, in my mind, on the appraisal side, and different types of everything's e-notarized, e-closing, e-process. So I think we're heading in the right direction. I think the real estate industry is kind of coming up to speed with the rest of the United States. But it is in the real estate professional's job and role to figure out how to best utilize these technologies to support and service our clients, our colleagues, and then what does that mean for our existing role? How does that allow us to better do our jobs, right? So most of the time people hire real estate agencies because they don't know how to do it, they don't know what to do, or they just don't want to and don't have the time, and their time is better invested elsewhere. That's why you hire a professional to do their job, right? So going forward, I think it's going to be a very, very exciting place to be in real estate, especially out of everything I've learned from Tavant, artificial intelligence, and just seeing very active movement in this space. You're seeing IPOs and acquisitions every day. And so I think by the end of 2021, it could be a whole different ballgame.
Thanks, Tara.
I just want to piggyback to what Tara just mentioned. I think one of the greatest causes of human suffering is our resistance to adapt to change, right? So in the face of uncertainty, and I call it the wildly auspicious time, the importance of home, we kind of understand, we feel the need of home, how important it is, the true meaning as the center of our attention. So not only we are craving for a sense of connection and community, but we desire nurturing homes that provide safe place for like accommodating and a diversity of needs. And what ties together is technology. So the gap, between a man and machine has been, shrinking. The difference between, bits and atoms are blurring. So how do we get more, be more engaging is, sensors, IoTs and mobile edge computing and 5G. These are all a part of man inventions, and we need to work together in ways that we might feel uncomfortable at the beginning, but the result will be much more, fruitful, prosperous for everybody that's involved. And that to me is, again, until we meet next time for another round of webinar for the audience, I think I would just ask this question to everybody. Take a pause and then think through as to where do you see yourself as a business owner? If you're the CEO of a company and you want to take your company from an A to a G, how can you bridge that gap? And instead of 5 years to come to G, how can you do that in 5 months? Because things are changing, the wheels are turning. Nobody is, even if we are working from home, we are not working a 9 to 5. We are doing a 9 to 11, So we want to work 25 hours instead of 24 hours, and yet that's too short span. So yeah, I think I talked quite a bit, but I just want to explore and shake people up in a good way. Like, guys, just do something, this can be the reality, because we didn't know how 10 years was. This is the reality, the future of reality, if I can say. Oh, I got too excited.
No, you're right though. And I think, technology is just, especially with things like, the whole propensity to list, predicting and actually capturing data on such a astronomically more efficient level, I think will only bring really exciting things to the industry. And there's honestly just no going back. People have gotten a taste for it, especially the customers, and they're like, yeah, whatever you're doing before, we don't want to hear it. Let's just look forward.
And Tara, Matt, Brad, and to Debbie, we were all talking about how do maybe we can find a core-shared space together. Like you just said, and I'm like, I want to be in Tiburon. You said I want to be in.
I have some ideas.
There you go. So we should take it offline. But this was a fun, fun session. So thank you, HousingWire, and thank you, Matt, Tara, Brad. If you guys want to stay in touch with us, please send us an email at hello@tavant.com, or reach out to us on LinkedIn, or reach out to HousingWire and they can connect you to us.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, well, before we head out here, I know we got some good closing statements, but I think we do have time for about a question or two. So just a reminder to our audience, we're short on time here, but if you want to throw in a quick question in the chat, we can always answer that after the fact. But just a quick one before we go, what are some concrete differences in how real estate firms and lending firms are operating today?
That is a good question. So a real estate company and a lending company start at different ends of the attach rate. The attach rate from a revenue perspective is optimized on the highest potential you can make is 12% of a transaction. So if we're talking about a $300,000 home, 12% of that actually gets paid to real estate agents, title companies, lenders, things like this. They both kind of come at it from different angles. From the real estate agent side, the buying and selling of home, the 2.5 to 3% on the buyer or the seller side, that's the revenue generation there. The lender makes their money on the origination, on selling it on the secondary, on packaging it, and then servicing and other auxiliaries such as title and things like this. They both start at opposite ends, and these ends are actually their revenue driving ends. When you actually think about, it doesn't matter what end you start on, you're still talking about one singular consumer and their end-to-end experience. And their experience will have to go from the real estate agent all the way through financing to closing to moving into the home. And so I think operationally, they're different by nature, and it has a lot to do with the sophistication of the technology of each individual company and things like that. But holistically, they're solving the same problem, but starting at different ends of the spectrum solving it. That would be my response there.
Thanks, Brad.
That's perfect. Does anyone have anything else to add to that?
I would only quickly add, if you, I would just say e-closing. You know, the way we close the loans has changed dramatically. It was already changing, but the past 12 months have forced it to become what it needs to become. It's a small example, but I think it's a concrete example of something that's changed across the board. You know, every company is learning how to do this.
Absolutely.
I
All right,
completely
I'm gonna
on that.
oh, go for it.
Oh no, I was just going to support what he just said. The e-closing, different parts of the closing process that before, even in let's see, was it beginning of 2019, mid 2019, when I was still working for First American Title, e-notarizing was not a thing. Like this, it was taboo. Like, don't even. Why would you even suggest a thing? It is just. And then you fast forward a year, and this is how we have to do business. So it's just interesting to see those dynamics kind of brought into play, and how the entire industry is there now and then moving forward.
Absolutely. Okay, y'all think we can get one in 3 minutes?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, what are parts of the home buying ecosystem that are changing the fastest? What has changed forever?
I would say home tours, definitely, to start off the how people are doing home tours. The use of video has astronomically been heightened. You see it across Instagram, TikTok, and even within brokerages, they're always pumping you to make sure you're doing this, even if it's not technically your listing. Make sure you're going and showing every property that you've been on to show that you're educated and you know what the product is in that area, and you're able to speak to it and be an informed educator for your clients. So I think in terms of the front end of the process, things like video and how home showings or home tours are scheduled, I think that will continue to shift in a good way.
Yeah, a lot of
I agree
too.
Oh, go ahead, Debbie.
Chatbot, yeah. No, I was just saying, Brad, a lot of chatbot, communication, like virtual assistants as well. Like as Tara said, like you take a picture, you get a full 360 tour, and then if you want to contact the real estate agent, he or she is live there, like addressing all your questions. Like my friend, she just had a home buying experience, so she was just narrating me the story. Like it's fascinating, super quick, always on top of it. So this wasn't there until last year and a half, right? So things are changing for good.
Yeah, for me, it's this concept of I want everything instantly. Like if I can't get Amazon delivered next day, I'm unhappy. So the concept of seeing a home, whether I'm seeing it through an app like Yaza or Matterport or Get Area, or even any of the ones that, let's say, Zillow has already built into their process. I want to see the inside of a home, but the truth is, I don't actually always believe what I'm seeing. It could have been staged. There's a lot of other things there. I need to know what I'm seeing is actually real before I'm going to get myself and my significant other in a car to drive X number of feet to look at a house. And guess what? In today's world, You don't always get a chance to look at a house. Sometimes you just have to put a bid on sight unseen. So that tour becomes so much more valuable, especially if you believe the accuracy and the certification of the source it comes from.
That's where you need flying cars. You have how about that?
Yes.
You need flying cars. Maybe we'll take the Maserati, Brad.
There we go. I love it.
Well, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. And just some quick housekeeping items. We've come to the end of our webinar today. So if you submitted a question and we didn't have the chance to answer it, we will get back to you, and HousingWire will be sending over the webinar recording to all registrants within the next 24 hours. And this webinar will also be available in our Knowledge Center at housingwire.com. Thank you so much to our panelists, and thank you so much to our attendees for joining us. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Alright.
having us.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks.